Okay, everybody, welcome back. So in this section, we're going to now launch Studio One for the first time, now that you have it installed. So go ahead and launch Studio One here. And I'm going to take you through making sure that our Studio One sees our audio box, and we'll take a little tour of the start page here. So when you first launch Studio One, it's going to scan all the plugins that are on your system, whether it's the stock plugins or if you eventually add third-party plugins, you'll see that start up. But it boots up pretty quickly. So over here is the start page. This is the first thing you're going to see when you launch Studio One. And you can see at the top here, Studio One Artist, right here. Let's go ahead and let's take a tour of this page, okay? So over on the left-hand side, we have two tabs here. We have Create a New Song, which we're going to do in a later section. Or we can open an existing document or an existing song file, which we'll talk about a little later. Beneath that, we have any recent files that if we opened up sessions in the past, as you start to work with Studio One and you work on your session, when you shut down Studio One and reboot it, you'll see the most recent files that you worked on here in the list, so you don't have to navigate through your computer to find it, which is really good. And then you also have a Songs tab here, so if you have a song, it'll be here as well. Okay, over in the middle here we have an artist profile. Right here in the center where you see this little image here, you can add yourself a logo or your photo or whatever here. If you want to do that, you just do that by clicking. You want to add a photo, you just click this little button here, and then you can go out to your desktop or wherever and you can add a photo there, which I don't have, but you can do that. Beneath it, it's going to have the name that the software is registered to, in this case me, David Vignola. You have an opportunity if you want to put the genre of music that you're working on, or you may want to work on a website address you can put here as well, so you can show off your website address if you'd like. And then underneath that, where it says built-in output, this is what we're going to talk about now. This is important. So this right now shows that Studio One is looking at the built-in, well, let me cancel that, the built-in output, the internal speakers in my MacBook Pro as our interface, which is not right. We need to change that. So we're going to come over here to this thing called Configure Audio Device. We're going to left click on that. And this is going to bring up a preferences window, and it's going to bring us to the audio tab here. And we're going to walk through all these different sections later. But for right now, we want to be on the audio setup tab. And you can see here that we have an audio device tab, and we have a playback device and a recording device. And right now it says again, built-in output, built-in input. It thinks the internal sound card to my computer is what we want to hook up. We don't. If you come over to the right hand side, there's a little drop down arrow. And because we plugged in our audio box USB 96, when you launch this as well, as long as your audio box is hooked up via the USB cable, you'll see your audio box here. Or any other interfaces you may have. If you have 2 or 3 audio interfaces hooked up to your computer, it will see all 3. Okay, so you're going to go ahead and you're going to choose the audio box USB. And it's going to make it the playback device and the recording device. Now, in this series, that's what we want. We want these both to be the same. But there could be times down the road as you expand your studio where maybe your recording device is the audio box USB, but your playback device is a different interface. And that's a little bit more advanced studio setup, but it gives you the option to be able to have Studio One play your audio once you record back through one device while recording on another, which is really nice feature. But for what we're doing here, and most times you're always going to have the audio interface, in our case the audio box USB, be the same for playback as recording. Okay, so that's the first thing we want to do. Now down here we have this thing called device block size, sample rate, input and output latency. And without getting too technical, let me just explain where we want to set this. It defaults at 128 samples, and that should be sufficient. Depending on your computer, if you drop down this arrow, it's going to give you a bunch of sample sizes. Okay, 128, 256 is kind of right in the middle. This has to do with a lot with your internal computer processor speed and the way it kind of handles the audio as you start recording. The general rule of thumb is this. When you're recording audio into your computer, you want to set this as a starting point around 128 or 256 samples, okay? You can leave it at 128. When you're mixing audio and we start using lots of plugins to mix our song, which we'll talk about in a future section down the road, you're going to want to raise this up a little bit to maybe 1024, 248 samples, because that will allow, it'll free up some computer resources to be able to handle all the plugins. And we'll talk about that later, so just realize what that is. And for now, just leave it at 128. Our sample rate is 48.0. Our input and output latency Basically what latency is the time that it takes from, let's say when you're recording, let's say an acoustic guitar, from the time that you strum that guitar, it goes out the guitar cable into your interface, through Studio One, back out of Studio One, into your interface again, and into your headphones. The time that it takes from the time you hit that chord or that guitar to the time you hear it in the headphones, that time difference is called latency. And when it's in this, small 4.94 milliseconds, and it's way down in the milliseconds, it's super fast, so you can't audibly hear the difference. However, depending on your computer processor and some of the specs of your computer, this is where the device block size will help you with latency. So for example, if you're recording an acoustic guitar or singing into a microphone, and you sing into it and then you hear a delay in your headphones and it's kind of weird, you can't play and you can't sing because you hear that delay, that latency is because this device block size is normally set too high, and you want to lower that. And by lowering that, and let's take a look here, at 128 samples, our input latency is 4.94 milliseconds and the output latency is 4.69. Watch what happens when I change this down to say 32 samples. You see how the latency drops to 2.94 and 2.69 milliseconds respectively? That makes the latency smaller, or the delay shorter. So if you start off at 128 samples and you're recording and you're hearing a delay in your headphones, the very first thing you do is come into your device block size and lower it by 1 click and play again and see if the latency goes away, the delay goes away. If you still have a problem, lower it a little bit more, and it'll eventually go away to the point where you're playing and you're hearing it instantaneously, or your ear perceives this instantaneously. There's always going to be some slight delay, but the human ear won't be able to hear it because it's so quick. Okay, so that's what the device block size will do in a nutshell. It just increases or decreases the latency that you have with Studio One, and a lot of it is dependent on your particular computer. But most times for recording, 128, 256, that's usually going to get you where you need to go. But if it doesn't, you know what to do now. Okay, so that's what goes on here. So once we've chosen our playback device and our recording devices, our audio box USP, we're just going to hit OK down here. Okay, and now you'll see down here it says audio box USB. Okay, so if it doesn't, again, click on audio device, just repeat the process. Now you can also check for updates here to see, make sure our version is the most updated version. Now if you just downloaded it off the website, it should be, but you can click this and Studio One will check, and it says right here your version is up to date. So you always want to make sure your version is up to date. Sometimes you'll see when you launch Studio One at the top of the page here above the Studio One logo up here, you'll see a little green text message that says update available, but you can always check it there as well. And then we also have the thing about Studio One, tells you a little bit about the software development. It gives you your product key under there all as well. Okay, so that's the center section of the start page. On the right section of the start page, as long as you're hooked up with a cable, Ethernet cable to your network or wirelessly through your network, you're going to have what's called the news feed. This is really cool, where PreSonus is continuously and constantly updating us with the latest and greatest information about PreSonus, their products, everything from their hardware to their software. A lot of times you'll find special deals on plugins and some of their software packages. They'll have anything that's relevant to Studio One and or to PreSonus products in general. You'll get an update news feed, which is kind of handy. And then over here we have a demos and tutorials set of stuff here, where of things here that you can check out as well. And again, this was all part of the additional content that you downloaded when you downloaded your software a couple of sections ago. Okay, so that's what that is all about there. And then you can always visit PreSonus on all their social media down here. Okay, now top right hand part of this page, we have this start screen. If you click on that button, it'll always bring you back to the start page. Now, if you click on the song button, if you have a new session or a new song created, which we don't yet, if you click on that, it would bring you to the new song page, or it will ask you to create a new song. So if you have a song opened already, it will bring you to the song session that you have open. If you don't have a song open like we don't, you're going to get the new song dialog box, which we'll talk about in a second. Okay, and then if you want to upgrade from Studio One Artist at one point to say Studio One Professional, you can do that here, and it should bring you out to their website. And it does, and it lets you go ahead and it brings you to the Studio One Artist upgrade from artist to all versions. So you can go ahead and you can choose the package that you want to upgrade. Okay, so that's what that is all about there. And last but certainly not least, we'll talk about over here, we have our create new song button, which again we'll do in a second. This will allow you, if I click on this will bring up the new song dialog box, just as hitting the song button here like I did a second ago. Okay, and that is the start page. Oh, and over here in the top left hand corner we have SoundCloud, where you can go ahead and you can link a SoundCloud account, your SoundCloud account, so you can upload your music right from Studio One right to your SoundCloud account, so you don't need to necessarily export it as an MP3 and then go out to SoundCloud and upload it. You can do it all within Studio One. If you don't have a SoundCloud account, that's okay too. SoundCloud is free. You should check that out if you don't know about SoundCloud. Okay, and that is it for this section. So if we come back in the next section, we're going to go ahead and we are going to start to create a song, a session file. I'm going to explain to you about the folder structure, and we're going to start preparing ourselves to start recording. So come on back for the next section.